What is the meaning of life? What and where is our place in the cosmos? Anything from before time? If the concept of before has no meaning without time? What is the nature of human agency and choice in a world with a God that either does not intervene or else constantly gambles with the fate of the universe? I'm behind the tree, and these are deep, important questions. We won't be going into any of them. Instead, we're going to be analyzing the 2012 album Hawaii Part 2 by Musical Miracle. Wait, start that, reverse it. Miracle Musical.
Broadly speaking, the album is an anachronistic associative collage with an abstract storyline and unnamed characters. One character, the main one, has been dubbed Simon by the fanbase, while the other, slightly less main character is referred to as Stella, which I think is actually quite good naming, especially considering the common motif of the Stella octangula in the album. So far I've found 14 themes, motifs, or recurrent ideas which cover all aspects of the album. The first one is religion or spirituality. This shows up everywhere in the album. The second one is light, especially atmospheric optical dealios. The third one is space. The album is full of themes of space and distance. The fourth is that it references some kind of show of many different kinds throughout the album. The fifth is it includes references to historical tragedies. The sixth, which is extremely important to the album, is time. Time shows up everywhere in it. The seventh is love, or a relationship. This is frequently portrayed as being between Simon and Stella. 8 is a flight. There are strange references in the background of almost all of these songs in the album to usually an airplane flight. 9 is video games. This album loves video games. There's even a video game attached to the album. 10 is electricity. In an album with one of its most prominent songs being Mind Electric, this is not too surprising. 11 is trees and plants, especially trees in a more people-y sense, which is interesting. 12 is the ocean, not just appearing on the cover, but also in many of the metaphors used in the album. The ocean is pivotal. 13 is infinity. Joe Hawley has stated that he is obsessed with infinity, and I'm not surprised, it's an interesting topic. 14 is illusions. This album is filled with references to things that are only in some sense real. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to associate each of the more connected, abstract themes with the 6 more connected vertices of the stellated octahedron. It's also called a stella octangula, both historically and also by some modern folks with some unusual beliefs. It's a shape frequently used in the album art and on most versions of the album cover itself. If you look very closely at the moon on the cover, it will be there. And the 8 more pointed, specific, terrestrial themes will be associated with the 8 more pointy points. Yes, as you can see here. When I first saw the cover of Hawaii Part 2, I noticed that it's odd. It's made, much like the album itself, of a series of disconnected pieces that somehow contain enough elements of similarity that they are cohesive as a whole. The generally black and white vibe is the first thing that struck me, like a bolt from the blue, ironically enough. A soft fade around darkens the edge of the version that I originally saw, as if it's being seen through a glass, or perhaps on a screen, or even through someone else's eyes. The bright white title, followed by rainbow Japanese text set on the horizon, which is a nice touch of infinity, is what next came to me. Then the general details of the picture, the ocean, the night or evening sky. On the left, 2 palm trees, a spiral staircase, and a shark or possibly killer whale fin looking a bit like the wingtip of a plane. In the upper right is the moon, and a strange, monstrous-looking fish. There are a number of unusual things that are attached to each of these elements. The stairs have stars, and also a strange structure on the first 3 steps. These black lines, which vaguely resemble the hands of a clock. But this is partially just an illusion, caused by the steps' vertical mirrored elements. The fin on the killer whale has, if you look very closely, a tiny bit or bite taken out of it. But it's hard to determine what this is from. If you look very closely, you'll see that connected to the fish is the moon. This is an angler fish, and the moon is its lure. That's very, very disturbing and quite an interesting imagery. If you look even more closely at the moon, there is the faint trace of a stellated octahedron, also called a stella octangula, which is something of a touchstone for the album. There are actually at least 2 different official versions of the album cover. A nearly fully black and white version, except for the text, which is still in rainbow. And then there's also a more plain but yet colorful version, which has none of the unusual, fantastical, metaphorical, perhaps hallucinated elements of this version. And it only has the pure natural scenes. One of the singular features of the cover is its title, Hawaii Part 2, a sequel with no original, the parting of 2 souls even. In Hawaii, each letter is mirror symmetrical, and the whole thing is a near miss. The 2 eyes at the end have an odd space between them, a parting, perhaps almost parting the sea. This is notable since Polly has said at least one of the melodies was dictated to him by the sea, on the beach in Hawaii in the summer of 1997, which was a very good time for me. These 2 lines at the end of the album title can be thought of as a pause symbol. The kind of pause which calls to the soul for reflection. I also think that there's an interesting repeated element of the 2 raised lines, which separate even in the process of reading the album's name, from connected in the H to only adjacent at the end of the word, to separated at the end. To me, these call forth the geometric idea of parallel lines, lines which must stay forever at a distance, yet move to infinity together. Indeed, in some geometries based on projecting onto a ball, the 2 lines touch precisely at infinity. Which I think is a very beautiful thought. The idea of coming into contact or coming to know another through an experience of infinity, despite the distance which must ever separate you, is, I think, one of the most beautiful ideas I have ever encountered. It's calming if you look at it right, much like I imagine standing on the Hawaiian beach would be. The word part in this is also an anadrome, a backwards version of the word trap.
which the anglerfish on the cover is an example. The lyric in the Mind Electric, "And you fall inside a hole you couldn't see," is a description of someone falling into a trap. Considering Holly's interest in word games, he refers to himself online as Whale Joey, which is an anagram of Joe Holly, with the capital letters preserved to emphasize this. I would not be surprised if this were an intentional feature. Also, when abbreviated, HP2 looks like the health bar in a video game.
The very first song of this album, Introduction to the Snow, is an interesting, beautiful song. Its title is a pun on Introduction to the Show, tying in the cold feel. This cold feel is partially due to the vocals being themselves recorded in the cold of the beginning, and adding the first of many references to a play on words, you might even say. Joseph Robert Hawley, aka Holly Jawali, J.R.R. Hawley, J. Rabbit Holy, Whale Joey, Jonah Whaley, Jolly Holiday, Joseph Infinity Hawley, Charles the Snark, etc. I can go on. The morally dubious central creator of this recorded the vocals for this track in a cold, snow-covered trailer to get exactly this chilly, faltering vocal effect. Interestingly, while the image of Hawaii does not exactly suggest snow or cold, it does actually snow in Hawaii regularly, high up on its mountains. Alone at the edge of a universe, humming a tune. Okay, so we're starting off wicked frickin' evocatively, with a kind of distance and solitude and space themes, with a potential allusion to the music of the spheres, a kind of harmony in the natural motions of the stars and planets across the sky, which the ancient Greek Pythagoreans espoused. Another potential here is that the narrator, and not the universe itself, is doing the humming, which kind of makes sense. Already there is a connection to the title, being on an island, Hawaii, in the middle of the ocean, described at times falsely, but that doesn't really matter as much, as the most isolated spot in the world, would certainly give you the feeling of being at the very edge of the universe. Another interesting choice of words here is a universe instead of the universe, implying the existence, at least in the context of this album, of multiple realities, multiple worlds, or multiple parts of the whole, like heaven and earth. With sparkling crystal souls aglow. The crystals, again, potentially tie into the idea of crystal shells, which the heavens were supposedly supported by in mythology. The ones that supposedly created the music of the spheres in Pythagorean mythology. But there are more potential interpretations as to what crystals we're talking about here. Here are 3 more. Snow is made of ice crystals. 2, the stella octangula itself is the beginning of a 3D crystal called an octet lattice, a uniquely strong crystal made of octahedra and tetrahedra tessellating space. It is also the first step in making a 3D Coke snowflake, a lovely little fractal. Or 3, the crystal is a prism that might diffract light into a rainbow. But why crystals' souls? Well, souls has a strong religious association, as does, to a lesser extent, the word aglow, which also ties into the album's many allusions to light. But what about sparkling? Well, it calls to mind the image of a sparkling shore, perhaps a golden one even. A glittering diamond, sparkling stars, and to boot, it has the word spark in it, which links it to electrical elements. which unsurprisingly for an album with such deep and rich motifs, come up again and again, reaching into the spotlight. This line is also filled with terms establishing broad conceptual themes in other ways. Souls sounds like shoal, which brings up the oceanic theme. Interestingly, using both sparkling, a reflected light, and glowing, an internal light, shows a kind of balance between that which is without and that which is within, the whole and the part. A part of thee, in the key of what we know to be, every part without me. The key is C, but beyond that, this is an unusually cryptic line. It includes a kind of triptych. Thee, we, and me, sort of like the implied I, edge, and universe from 2 lines ago. Let's break it down bit by bit. A part of thee in the key. The speaker is putting or finding a bit of another in the music. The lack of a comma in this line makes it confusing. There seems to be someone saying that there's nothing of themselves in the music. The word key here, though, makes me think that it is almost like the key to a riddle, or perhaps the Stella Octangula is the key. We'll return to this idea of Stella being some kind of mysterious key in the song Black Rainbows. We'll dive deeper into its significance. Unfortunately, I don't understand the riddle in this line fully. Also, the word part shows up here twice. Not once, twice. Part 2. Holly has said that this word, part, can be thought of in the sense of the phrase parting of 2 souls. I think the trouble I'm having understanding this part is tied to my trouble to understand the whole album. It's a garden path sentence, which is consequential enough to slip you into a trance. Duality shows up prominently in the next line, too. Knows only 2 can make it light. This lovely line works as both a statement of the ever-present need for human contact each of us has, and also it reminds me personally, maybe because I'm a bit of a loon, of the moon, which requires the sun to make it light. Beyond that, it is literally saying, when taken with the previous line, that a part of thee knows only 2 can make it light, or you need another, possibly even intending you need me, though expressed far more poetically than I just have. Incidentally, it's also an answer to the question, how many metaphysical dualists does it take to change a light bulb? Notice once more the play off the theme of light. Also, if 2 can make it light, then the singer being alone at the edge of a universe, as far from another as humanly possible, then would represent the quintessence of darkness, except for the stars, those beautiful stellated objects. Sometimes you need to have the dark to see the light that has always been there. You'll live forever tonight. This very much reminds me of a beautiful Ray Bradbury story about a carnival and a kind of artistic immortality. If you're interested, simply Google Ray Bradbury Live Forever. But beyond that, the line ties into the spiritual side of the music and creates a strong feeling of something deeply magical. The line promises someone immortality. But who and how? Us? The person referred to as the 2 lines ago? Such an enormous promise holds a tremendous weight to the narrative part of this album. So who promises immortality? Religions generally, cults in particular, but many mystical schools of thought have their own version of immortality. Even taken literally, it's a fascinating line. How can you live forever if it's just for the night? It's a lovely kernel of paradox which stresses, among other things, the use of the concept of subjective time and subjective infinity. In the album, we will come back to this concept in more detail later when we'll have gotten to a time machine. But the experience of subjective infinity comes up evocatively in the original description of the album from Miracle Musical. genre of infinity which is expressed through hologram. But a hologram? That's a little weird. What is a hologram? A hologram shows, in some sense, a hidden image of a higher dimensional object than one would expect possible. That's in a very literal sense, I mean. Interestingly, they also produce rainbows. Doubly interesting, the image of at least one perspective of the object within a hologram can be seen in whole from any single piece of it, within the limit, the whole and the part. Check out Ray Bradbury's take on subjective time travel in his story The Time Machine, if you're feeling adventurous, and in the mood for a deep rabbit hole, The Toynbee Convector. A literally and metaphorically darker interpretation is that tonight lasts forever because the night never ends. Such a case would be true at the end of the universe in space, or time. According to relativity, light itself, or anything moving at that speed really, not that anything with mass can actually move at that speed, experiences any length of time in an instant. Eternity in the blink of an eye. To live in the hearts we leave behind is to live forever, to see the light that has always been there. The general feeling of the song is a sweepingly magical, mystical, occasionally philosophical tone hiding barely under the snowy surface of the feeling of a love song crooning its way along an apologue, a metaphysical fable. The love song element seems to hint at a separation, a distance from the singer's love, the beginning of a play or a movie. Musically, the tune starts with a lovely bit of contemplative piano, adds a horn to the ivories, and then strings at the same time as wistful, longingly whistling. These reach a crescendo and fall into silence, and then rise like the tide to meet a voice. Styled like a 50s radio, the voice sings, and soon a quartet-like backing harmony underscores it with melodic crooning. Wind can be heard in the background from a real or imagined snowstorm. Or maybe none was there at all. Maybe it was surf. After the voice is finished, the piano continues again, this time accompanied by a music box-like instrument. It's also a bit harp-like, as well as strings which imbue it with a lovely somnambulance. There is wonder and the feeling of falling in love, and a particular longing.